Ladies and gentlemen, hello again, and welcome back to Don't Worry About the Government. It is now the month of May, May 11th, as I speak to Sean Frieder. Sean, how you doing?
Doing all right. Glad it's summer. Glad to be back. How you doing, Chris?
I don't know that I'm glad it's summer. The allergies out here in Texas have been at an all-time awful high, crippling me and many, many others that I know. The heat is starting to swell in here. Summer is very much afoot. I played a show here on Saturday, and it was like this indoor-outdoor venue where people were massed inside. The door is open to the outsides. There's open air. So it's even hotter in the venue than it is outside, and even sweatier and more humid and miserable in the venue. Sean, do not love summer.
Yeah, as soon as I said it, I'm programmed to say that because as a university professor, summer means a bit more freedom for me. But other than that, I mean, I'm with you, man. We both know what it is to grow up in the oppressive heat of Arizona summers. Florida summer is a little bit different. I'm sure Texas summer's got their own thing too, but yeah, not necessarily a fan myself. We get rain with our summers, which Arizona gets the nice monsoon season. I always like that part of it. But other than that,
that's the best.
yeah,
I love
lovely.
monsoon season. You'll probably agree with me on this. There's something different about Arizona summer, though, right? Like it's like your body makes adjustments to it
Yeah,
physiologically, and you're just able to endure that dry heat at much higher volumes. I mean,
yeah.
obviously after like 95 to 100, it starts getting pretty sweltering, but like you get to a point where you don't mind the low 90s.
No, yeah, there's something, I don't know what it is, but like, yeah, it's like you say, there's a misery index that rises, but it doesn't rise like linearly with the temperature. It's like once you've hit a certain temperature point, your body's just kind of like, well, I expected to be this miserable for about 3 or 4 months, and you just kind of live with it. I mean, to be fair, you spend less time outside as much
Oh
as you
yeah,
possibly
yeah, yeah,
can.
yeah.
You stay near your friends' pools as much as you possibly can, or just indoors. But yeah, there is something. It's not quite the same.
There tends to be a breeze at night too. Like summer
Nights are
nights.
nice.
Yeah,
Nights
the
are
nights are
nice.
really nice out in Arizona. Yeah, lot of good times we had back in the day. At
Good
night.
times.
Yeah, I know for sure. Nostalgia. Speaking of nostalgia, I think we're all going to be nostalgic for the good old days of Twitter. Amazingly calling it the good old days of Twitter in the last decade.
I
Um,
didn't know if that was going to be a Roe v. Wade segue or if that was going to be a Twitter segue. There's a lot. That could have gone a lot of ways.
American decline has many faces, Sean Frieder. Uh, I think we're gonna have like progressive MAGAism here, where eventually we're gonna want to make America great again, but like by which we mean like bring back Roe versus Wade, and allowing transgendered kids to
Oh
not be
man,
scared in schools anymore, and
the
bringing
MAGA
back
symbology will just hop between parties every 30 years.
well, it'll be MAPA, and now it'll be Make America Progressive again.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So no, I mean, this I think is fairly light topic in many ways, because it's like Musk is going to buy Twitter. Does this really matter? Not really. Twitter is a 14-year-old social media website that is, I think, at best ever been third among all of its competitors. It's on the decline. It's not adding to its network base. It has a very sort of niche audience among journalists and way too online people. I mean, the joke is it's just journalists and furries on Twitter and right wingers. And like that's basically right. Like it's not the public square. It's not really much of anything. And so to me, when Musk said he wanted to buy Twitter, this has always been about more or less getting Trump his Twitter back. I mean, like, I don't think it's any more complicated than that. I think some of the news stories that have been trickling out from Musk this week about how he would give Trump his Twitter back, and like how he hadn't even really thought about what he thinks social media policy should be, although he maybe is loosely in favor of shadow banning and many of the things that right wingers said they never liked. But he's going to get Trump his Twitter back. Like, he just doesn't believe in giving Trump a permanent ban. That was a wrong and horrible abridgment of freedom of speech. Now, a couple of things before I toss it to you here. Initially, Musk was all like, "I'm going to buy it myself," right? And then I've detected over the last couple of weeks here, he's been getting cold feet on this. And that's what this whole buyer group thing is about. Everyone's aghast about who he put together as the buyers. I sort of go like, well, this is exactly who this website holds any value to. Like, fascist governments like Qatar and Saudi Arabia, these sorts of governments want to make sure social media companies can't harm them. And so social media this website still has utility to them as something to own and make sure that they can neuter. But outside of that, there haven't been any business buyers. And that's what's interesting to the buyer list to me too. Musk wants to offload how much of his ownership it's going to be and how much of a whomping he's going to take when he buys this crappy company that is assuredly doomed over the next 4 to 5 years here. If Twitter's stock plummeted and went the way of like Peloton or something like that, or like the way Facebook is going right now, that wouldn't shock me in the slightest, because they've never been profitable. Like, this is not a company that's been particularly good at showing how to be profitable. So Musk is going to buy Twitter. I think Twitter becomes a right-wing paradise for a while. And over time, basically, journalists find somewhere else to go. And once they do that en masse, then Twitter is effectively just a ghost site like MySpace.
So yeah, a bunch of different thoughts on this. I mean, I guess to start with, like, the concern of Elon Musk and Twitter generally. I guess I would say that I think in terms of the daily operating status and procedures of the website, like you said, I don't think that there's a lot of complicated stuff that's going to be going on here. I do think, I wouldn't say that, like, I think that in Elon Musk's mind, he's really thinking primarily about Trump, but I think he's thinking about Twitter in a way that basically has the same effect as you're saying, which is, I think he has just a really reductionist view of free speech. And I think it's the same view of free speech, by the way, that basically Donald Trump has. And I mean, I think a lot of people have that too, which is, it's really not a view of free speech. It's just, hey, I'd like to be able to say whatever the hell I want and not really have major, retribution against me, at least in the form of bans or something like that. So, I mean, I think that he comes into it basically with this kind of naive, simple idea of, like, that kind of thing has to go. But then, I'm reminded of kind of like the speech from, like, the Joker in The Dark Knight, where it's like, this is someone that's like, this is a dog chasing a tire. Like, once he catches it, I don't think he really knows what the hell he's going to do with it. In economics, this is what would be referred to as, like, a prestige or a luxury investment, where, this is not really something, I think, that, as you point out, makes sense as something where, like, he's going to get huge returns on this investment, that this is a wise financial
He's overpaying
decision
on the investment. Yeah. I mean, the asking price that he offered to the board was so high they couldn't turn him down.
Right.
Which only speaks to how bad his position is. And I guess, real quickly on the Trump thing, just to maybe toss this back to you and see what you think about this. I guess when I say this is primarily about Trump and getting his Twitter back, I should maybe modulate that a little bit and say that this is about getting Trump's Twitter back in service of Musk trying to be someone who is able to suck up a lot of Trump's fan base. That Musk wants to be this generation's Trump. The way that Donald Trump was in the 80s, Musk wants to be that. Maybe Musk has aspirations, not obviously to the presidency because he's not eligible, but to have some greater say in American political life. And this is his first political move that's better understood as a political move.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I mean, even there, I would say that, like, compared to like an 80s, 90s-ish Donald Trump, I think that, that's someone that, like, he's just kind of an idiot that wants to be in a playground built for him in New York, for a while, and people are paying attention to him. But he wants that level of social relevance. And I think that is what basically Elon Musk wants now. I think Elon Musk would rather frame that, like, not as a, like, old style kind of like Playboy millionaire kind of style, but he wants to sort of frame himself himself as an oligarch. And I think in order to do that, you make these like luxury, legacy investments that, they're not going to pay out. And I mean, the market, again, like you say, is showing that, he's about 12% over what the market price seems to currently be sustaining. Some of that could be that they don't think that the deal is going to go through. A lot of it's probably just that they don't think it's a particularly attractive investment at that price. But, I don't think that he necessarily cares about that. He might back out of the deal. And if he did that, like Musk being the way he is, I don't think
that wouldn't surprise anyone. No, because he did that with the candy company.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. He was going to buy, what was it, C's Candy or something like that. And then he got cold feet on that.
Yeah.
And frankly, that was a better investment.
Yeah, actually, I mean, dollar for dollar, yeah, that's probably
candy
right.
is going to be around in 100 years, Sean. I feel really, I don't know about Twitter, but like people like candy. It's pretty popular.
I hope C's Candy is around in 100 years. I like that company. The other thing I'll say about Elon Musk is that I think that this is a good example, and this is like, I consider this as a warning shot across the abstract collective bow for us as a civilization, as a society that's going into the 21st, 22nd, 23rd century. We have all these new problems of communication. Like we were a bunch of monkeys flying around on a rock around a nuclear reaction. And like, we have to figure out a way for these like 7-8 billion people to all talk to each other. And like, who's doing the regulating and who's actually controlling these global communications platforms? Now, I mean, I'm not going to say that like I was super much happier with like global communication being controlled by like a small board of extremely wealthy people. I'm less happy still with like a single person ostensibly having that kind of control, but like species, fellas, like this is a problem. Got to figure this out. I'm not really sure what the answer is, but like this ain't gonna work going forward. And if we keep fucking around with this shit like this is bad for the species long term. I mean, even short term, this is pretty bad. And I think you see why. Like in particular, you have the two most visible heads associated with social media, Zuckerberg and now Musk. These are people that I think that we would all agree collectively, like almost specifically as an aspect of their personality, they have problems with social intelligence, with empathy, with being able to understand other people. And like, that's their fucking business. Like that's unacceptable to have people
it is
control
the sustaining joke. It's the sustaining resonant joke about both of them. It's like Mark Zuckerberg is Data from Star Trek Next Generation. He wants to laugh like you humans do. Right. And Elon Musk is a petulant child on Twitter all the time who like posts like he's 14 when he's approaching 50. It's these two men have really, really clear personality flaws that I think if you had like an election or a referendum even of, do you want these people as the controllers of social media, they would lose in a wild rout.
Yeah.
Musk would do better than Zuckerberg, but I assure you, Zuckerberg, if his status as the board of Meta, because this is such a big company, it's too big to fail or whatever, was somehow put to the American people, I think Zuckerberg would be lucky to get 25% in a national referendum.
Yeah.
Seriously.
No, I mean, if we had some sort of like, I think eventually where this has to go, this looks like something that we do on a global level. It's something that would involve internet voting. It would involve some sort of like, board of overseers globally for, some sort of social communications platform linked together, public, private. This is like really, far out future stuff that like we won't be able to figure out for a while now. That's what it eventually has to look like. But if you were to take those referendum calls today, like the people that are currently controlling this stuff, there's not even a chance that the American people would be okay with that. And I mean, I'm not necessarily sure I'd be super happy with the average person, the American population or the global population would be okay with. And that's why, this is just something.
I'm just trying to find a metric for consent that I think any of these guys could possibly pass. And I really, no, I'm with you. It's obviously fraught to be like, hey, average American person who barely understands that their computer needs to stay plugged in order to like have the battery be charging. Do you think you could maybe weigh in for a moment here on the nature of global communications and technology? Like, no, obviously that's fraught, but like this is about Zuckerberg. This is about Musk. It's about these people, and I'm with you. It's frankly the sort of issue with Musk buying Twitter is just billionaires have way too much control. The billionaires who have way too much control in our society are particularly flawed individuals,
Yeah.
and that like really needs to be more meaningfully reckoned with.
I mean, I think you have to take into account, like, and I don't think this is just wealth, but I think you obviously see this in politics. And I'm not the first person by any means to point this out, but like money, power, like you might, get some people that chase things that just happen to come with those things because they're that passionate about whatever the field is. And I think you get people like, say what you will about like a Gates or like a Steve Jobs or something. I mean, they also have their huge gaping personal flaws, but like, that they might be in it for more like the love, and then they finally fall into the money or the power. But like, you get a group of people that have this much money or this much power, and you are like almost by definition selecting on like personality disorders. Like, who else could possibly put up with the level of work, the level of stress, the level of anything other than like you are driven by a maniacal need for power, or like you just have like seriously different social
Well, yeah,
processing
like
than
why
most human
wouldn't you walk
beings.
away at some point, right? You have $1 billion. A billion should be enough for any human being to be like, okay, I'm done. Work, I could do something else. I actually
Yeah,
don't have to impose myself on the planet like this. Like
yeah,
I have more than enough money, more than I'll ever possibly spend. And the best possible thing I could do at this point is either one, try to do public good, to quote, of course, Musk, when it comes to ending world hunger, and world hunger not feeling it. An incredible quote from Musk, even if he's saying it glibly. The fact that he
yeah.
can joke about people starving while he's smoking a cigar on the Joe Rogan podcast, tells you everything about where this guy's at. I mean, I think the best thing that these people who have $1 billion could do would be to withdraw from society. And I think anyone who doesn't, and someone like Mark Zuckerberg, who's been making money hand over fist for now 2 decades, way too much control. It's about the control. It's about
Yeah.
the status. Zuckerberg gets off on the fact that he can get called before Congress, this supposedly very powerful body that like us, the average citizen, would be scared of, or even like, you know, a mid-level businessman or something would be scared of. And Zuckerberg can just basically beclown the Democrats and the Republicans, and they can't even do anything about it. Musk can ignore them, or Musk can have Tesla have recall after recall after recall and basically scoff at the idea that Congress is going to do anything to regulate Tesla and their vehicles.
Yeah.
And I think it stops being about the money, because it's more money
Yeah.
than they can ever spend. But the power, there's nowhere else to get the power. There's
I mean,
nowhere
there's
else to get
this,
status.
there's a line from Breaking Bad, and like the point at which that these people all arrive, either they've gotten there because they just had it in them forever, or like at something happens in the process when you get to that level of power. Like, then you kind of this Walter White syndrome, where like you stop thinking of yourself as like, I mean, in his case, not a particularly great place to start as like a meth wizard, but like you start thinking of yourself as beyond that. And then he has this line where he like starts to fully change towards the end of the series, where he says, like, we're not in the meth business, we're in the empire business. And I think that that's basically the way that like all of these people develop over time, is they stop thinking of themselves as doing X, maybe the thing that they were specialized in, and instead they fall in love with their own story, and they see that like, like I've risen like this far, what else can I do? And I think your point of, what should a billionaire do once they've reached that level, and like largely I think the answer is like retire generously into like charitable contributions and kind of like leave civil society alone to a certain extent. I think that's right, because I think what you see is that most wealthy people, they get to that point and they start thinking that they can help. And I think you have certain cases where like, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, in terms of at least the medical research that they've helped, yes, that's done some good. And there's plenty of good philanthropic organizations, but like, you can't trick yourself into thinking that you, by jumping in to save every single problem, you're going to be an expert in 45 different things. You're going to save the world. And like, that's where, we have to have less of an emphasis on these hero people and just more bodies of experts doing things, because that's where it's actually going to come from, is people who know stuff, not people that have like had just survivorship bias of, like just sorting themselves to the very top.
soaring themselves to the very top in a market exercise and thinking that that makes them qualified to do X, Y, and Z. I will say I am not particularly nostalgic for the Clinton Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation of doing well by or doing good by doing well or doing well by doing good or what what they came up with. I think there's a lot of really valid criticisms to be lobbied at those. However, what alarms me even more going forward is that people like Musk and Zuckerberg, our generation of billionaires, feel no onus whatsoever to do shit all. So, like, Musk is going to throw a fire festival while the world burns. As a joke, as a troll, to get likes and retweets on Twitter.
This is the thing that bothers me is that, like, if you go back 100 years, you have, the Carnegies and the Rockefellers, and you have all these like legacy families that like are pumping tons of philanthropic money in. And like, again, these are families where like, this is probably a huge problem in many ways that the money is located there, but like,
and poor people needed schools and not opera houses.
Yeah. So I mean, you got money being distributed in the wrong way, but you still have money being distributed in some sense. And at least like there was this expectation. I talk about this sometimes, like with relation to attitudes that we see in the presidency. Of there used to be this sort of attitude of what the French call like the Noblesse Oblige. That like you as the wealthy person are supposed to, your role in society is to like paternalistically take care of what you see as these schmucks that are like running around society, and like your job, you are supposed to take care of them. And like, you get that with like an H.W. Bush kind of figure that like, I come from this like legacy family to take care of the people. And like, that's not a great thing, but it's better than what's replaced it, which is this like what's popular now is this almost active thumbing of the nose at the idea that as a wealthy person, you should have any social responsibility whatsoever. I mean, what the public likes, to the extent that they like them, about Donald Trump and Elon Musk is that they actively flout all of these social conventions. And I mean, I don't know what you do with that. That's crazy. I wouldn't have guessed that would have happened 30 years ago. I mean, it's crazy.
No, okay. So I love that you brought this up. One, because Noblesse Oblige was like literally on the top of my head. But two, it kind of got me thinking about the other thread that I think pulls together some stuff that we were bantering about prior to the show. We do talk before the show, and stuff that's on the slate here, which is like the changing nature of American conservatism. American conservatism, shortly put, what's changed? And if you asked me to lazily come up with a short answer as to what changed, it's the utter loss of Noblesse Oblige among what the modern conservative strains are at this point. Economically speaking, it's not about trying to make a society that takes care of people and having sort of differing views about whether the New Deal can do that or whether the market, compassionate conservatism, like that's gone. Even saying compassionate conservatism, they'd be like, nerd, get out of here. Marjorie Taylor Greene's got no place for compassionate conservatism. Madison Cawthorn has no place for compassionate conservatism. Trump is not a compassionate conservative. And if anything, he sort of makes it a point to poo-poo compassion on all levels. Even in terms of social conservatism, it is no longer about what is best for society. Frankly, as we are 1 week into the fallout of the leaked opinion on Roe versus Wade, it is really telling that as you look through the lit and the opinion columns and all of this stuff, and I did a fair amount. I can't say I've read every single National Review article or anything like that, but I was looking because I was just curious. No sense of saying that like this is ultimately going to result in good outcomes for the country. No affirmative case made that Roe versus Wade is actually, and I'm not saying morally good, I'm saying economically, like the outcomes of doing this are actually really good for America. So beyond this being a moral good, this is actually going to be a societal good to the country. All will benefit, even if there's moral conflict for the libs, etc., etc. It's not about that. It's not about that. It's just about control. This loss of Noblesse Oblige is a really common thread across social conservatism, and lastly, across foreign policy conservatism. There is no. You look at the critiques of Biden. Foreign policy wise, they're upset that he left Afghanistan, not because we needed to do a better job taking care of Afghanistan or anything like that, but just because they want us to kind of keep troops there because we want to keep fighting the Taliban. Insofar as there's a critique of Joe Biden on Ukraine, it is not we have an obligation to stop war crimes. Sean, I was going to do initially when I was prepping for the show, I was going to do like a list of all the war crimes that have happened in Ukraine up to this point.
Man.
Okay, so I was prepping for that. Right? Because I thought that was going to maybe be like a Sean, give me about 3 minutes here. I'm going to read something right quick. There's a full Wikipedia article that sprawls on and on and on and on and on. I have more to say about that later, but isn't it telling that the Republicans feel no sense of obligation to the world with their foreign policy? It's a foreign policy that serves America, me first. And America first is one more iteration of that lack of noblesse oblige, or noblesse oblige, however you like to say it. It doesn't really matter to me because, like, again, I'm not saying if conservatism readopted it, it would be good. It would still have many of the same problems it had that made me not a conservative back when. But this absence of noblesse oblige across the board, domestically, socially, and foreign policy wise, the three pillars of Reaganism, if you will, and the three pillars of like HW and even W's like compassionate conservatism. Because I mean, again, in the cell of the Iraq War, they're like, we're going to bring democracy. Women aren't going to be under headscarves. They're going to go to school and stuff. I mean, like, it was like, think about the children. Think about the women. It'll be good for people. Like, we have an obligation to these people, do we not? You don't have to believe these arguments to realize that they were making these now. And now they're just gone. They don't care. It's just about winning. That is the nature of this conservatism. And I don't think, like, I certainly, in watching Nancy Pelosi, did you see the clip of Pelosi saying that we need a strong Republican Party for the fourth time in 2 years, several of which have been after a domestic terror attack? Pelosi has not come to terms with this, but neither has media and polling, which we were grousing about before the show. What's changed about them is I think they don't know how to fully capture that in the presentation and in the polling yet. Without sounding like they are very biased against the conservative movement at this point. But I'm sorry, this is who they are. And more importantly, it's not me saying who they are. It's them with their own catchphrases saying who they are.
There's a lot to unpack there. And I mean, I think it's an important lens to look at this through because, like, I think the closest to an older or a more like a view of conservatism articulated in previous decades, like this seems to me closer to the open articulation of like Margaret Thatcher, there is no such thing as society, and I don't think, even though Reagan and Thatcher, like they're close together, Reaganism, Thatcherism has a lot of things that looked close. Like, I don't think that like that has really ever been, up until more recently, the open and naked way it's presented is just, there's really no societal obligations. We're not trying to solve collective action problems. There is just almost kind of like a liberty of laziness of like, there's a simple thing you can do, which is everyone just does their own thing. And like, hopefully everything works out from that. And like, past, scholars have talked about the difference between conceptions of a positive and a negative liberty. I'm at, just because this is where my head is at, I'm burned out after the semester, been playing some video games recently. I'd like to take the opportunity here to like coin a term for liberty here, which is like, I think that the conservatism that you see today with like their view of liberty is like what I'll call like Elden Ring liberty, which is like, so like Elden Ring is this massive open world RPG. And like the whole thing is like you have limitless freedom, like far more freedom than like pretty much any game you could ever imagine. You can do basically anything, but like almost everything kills you. And that's the thing, is like, it's a world beset by collective action problems that no one can solve. But like, if you just on a very simple measure say like, how much freedom is there? Oh, there's tons of freedom. And I think like, this is like 3,000 years later, like what you would see if you just keep adopting this idea over and over again of like limitless freedom. but eventually what this means is like not really effectively much positive freedom at all, because you don't have the resources to solve the collective action problems to do these things. Everyone's hemmed in, but everyone's like free in this very, very lazy sense that allows society to crumble while allowing everyone to kind of, in theory, make their own individual decisions.
Yeah, it's like a tyranny of the state of nature, but and I think that sort of like captures part of it, like particularly along climate change, right? Like it's the Ben Shapiro, just sell your house to Aquaman and move further ashore. I watched a $310,000 house get sucked into the ocean here last night on Twitter. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make a sale in time. Right. So like it's like that sort of freedom. But I also think like kind of like a video, like conservatives want you to think you're free, and they want you to start from the idea of, see, look at how expansive Elden Ring is. And you got to pull the game back and go, okay, yeah, but you guys decided to be the developers of that game. So like all of this freedom exists in tight constraints that you all came up with. It all exists within parameters you all came up with. So like, yeah, like, you're free to have sex. But there is this one rule that you can no longer, if you get pregnant, do anything about it. Right. And that's the other part of it too.
You don't have the right. Oh, you don't have the right. And for like the 20 Elden Ring players listening right now, you just laughed, but that's a message from the game that it frequently gets left. If you can't go into a place that someone writes that message down, and like, oh, you don't have the right, does seem to be kind of the clarion call.
Okay. See, like I like that. I haven't played Elden Ring yet. I'm
softening you up for it.
Yeah, no. So I am currently on, Sean. I'm on Romancing Saga, which is this really interesting Square Enix game that was made in the mid '90s.
I remember that.
Only got released in America, like Romancing Saga 3 is the one I'm playing. It only got released in America like a couple of years ago. And it is, for a mid-90s RPG, super complicated. The combat system has there's like weapons and different weapon classes and different battle formations, and there's like an elemental system that's like relevant to like if you fight in an ice area, ice spells are more powerful, that sort of thing. It is actually a fairly complicated little game. Anyways, as a quick aside there. But all right, so we've got a few minutes left on this first clip here. Okay, let's real quickly. I want to talk, I guess, on Sanders' 2024 comments, which are now a minute old here. But like Sanders said that essentially, and I want to qualify this because like the libs have been going after him a little more aggressively than they ought to. But basically what he said is that if Joe Biden sought to not seek renomination, like if he decided that he wasn't going to, do a second term, Sanders would run again. Which immediately got a massive hell no for me on this. Not because I have been razzle-dazzled by Joe Biden. More on that in the second half here. I have not been razzle-dazzled at all by Joe Biden.
You don't say.
No. Tipping the hand for the second half of this show. But Bernie Sanders is still emblematic of part of the problem here, which is we do not need 80-year-olds manning key structural posts in the government at anywhere near the volume they currently do. If you look at the current chain of succession right now, absent Kamala Harris, the average age of the chain of succession are all people who could reasonably be expected to have a stroke on any given day.
Entire leadership of the Democratic Party in their 80s.
Yeah. Wild. And the level of discourse on this, I feel like much like Roe versus Wade's only just now starting to catch up, but the stories about Feinstein that have been coming out over the last several months here. I have one here, or I had one here on Feinstein, where she once again was having issues remembering who's there. Grassley, similar reports have been coming out about him. These people should not still be in government. These people in the Supreme Court should not be in government.
This ties to the conversation that we were just having, in that, again, like, even if you have someone that I think is well-intentioned, in many of the cases, I think some of these people are at least, You have people that are in these positions of power because they don't have the thing that goes off in most people's head that says, like, I don't need to do this anymore. I can stop. This can or even should end. They just keep ticking. These are little Energizer bunnies, and they're not going to stop until they turn off. And yeah, like you said, like it's going to be by a stroke for most of these cases. It's very frustrating that we have institutions designed that basically depend on people having the force. I mean, when I bring this up to people, oftentimes what they'll say is, well, you know, like people have the right to vote as they want. And if they're continuing to elect these people, it's ultimately up to them. And it's just like, to me, it is a silly and naive view.
It fundamentally misunderstands how elections work too. Yeah, that's not how districts work.
No. Yeah. I mean, the incumbency advantage is so strong for so many different reasons. There's no way that on a neutral playing field, if Feinstein walked in having not had the experience and not based on the amazing things that she's done over 30 years or whatever, just like if she came in as a fresh face, presented herself and her ideas and her ability to get those things done now, there's not a chance on earth that she would survive a primary. And incumbency advantage allows you to maintain this well into your 80s. And I will say, you know, even for people that have become folk heroes, even for people that I respect in a lot of ways, I mean, you look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She had an opportunity to step down, and when she was quite old, and she could have done that before we fell into the nightmare that we've fallen into now, and we could be looking at a very different Roe v. Wade decision in a month or so if she had just not done. So I mean, there's a lot of this. It's good people, it's people I like, it's people I don't like, it's people on the courts, it's people in the presidency and the legislative branch. We do not take age seriously enough, and we need to, because, you know, the average age that people are going to live is just going to go up and up over time. And I think, you know, we've talked about this before on the show, but this is revealing age is going to be a very significant divider in terms of partisanship, public opinion, in terms of ability to get things done. Generational representation is a real thing. And I've been saying, you know, to my students, to people our age, if you're under the age of 40, 45, and you just feel like politics has never made sense to you, and it's never really reflected your social reality or what's going on, because it hasn't. And I mean, in some sense, it hasn't in a wealth cast kind of sense, but in a lot of ways, it also just hasn't because they're not representing your generation.
No, like, they're like representing like 65 to 85. Yeah. Like the government you've been living under is largely a government that serves and services the demographies of the 65 to 85-year-old class, like the middle and upper class specifically in those cohorts. But like, that's what the politics is for. You know, it's what that group is willing to tolerate.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's also the group, again, I mean, this is something that you could absolutely pin on younger people, but this is the group that vote. I mean, they vote 3 times the clip of 25 to 30-year-olds. So, you know, of course, they're going to get more represented in that sense. They have more money. Of course, they're going to get more represented. They have more connections to members of Congress, to people in the legislature. Of course, they're going to be able to get more representation. So, you know, I don't think we take this seriously enough as a society. There's a lot of ways in which age is just stacked the deck against, you know, younger people. And I mean, this is unfortunate because more and more technology goes on. You know, the difference from one generation to the next is going to keep growing. And I mean, this is a problem that we have to get in front of. I don't see us doing it, and it's scary, and it's affecting our politics badly right now.
This comment from Sanders, I guess, upset me the most because he is uniquely positioned right now to be the guy to say to the other gerontocrats, hey, I'm 80 years old. This is going to be my last term because I'm too old to keep reasonably asking the people of Vermont and the people of America to have an 86-year-old as their senator going forward. This is my last term. Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Grassley, Clarence Thomas. I mean, long list of gerontocrats. It is time for all of us to go. If Sanders gave that speech, it would be the greatest thing he could do. It
would be fascinating. It would
fascinating and amazing.
Into a moment. And, you know, and the other thing I'll just really quickly throw in is that this would also, the other reason I'm not as happy about the idea of a Sanders running is just looking at what I know will happen with identity politics in the Democratic primary system. I really want the next slate of candidates to be female centric, because if we
more on that in the second half for sure. Right. No. Let's pick that up on the next one. See you then.